All right. So this is my first attempt at trying to do a storyboard. So, first off, this is all pre-production, which means pretty much this is all in my head, stuff I've thought up, and definitely not concrete. So, if I make mistakes and errors, expect that because this is not the finished product. This is just an idea of mine that I wanted to write down and talk about right now. So, first off, I am using pretty cheap equipment, obviously nothing too expensive to make this. I'm using Google Keep to do the drawings. So if you have any questions, you could just message down below or do really whatever. First off, I like using Google Keep, one, because I've experience with it, and two, because of the easiness it has with deleting and so forth. But on to the story. So, first off, the story I am going to tell you all is just going to be called Gifted at this point. It sounds pretty simple, obviously, and that's the whole point. It's about gifts. In this story, gifts are pretty much superpowers that most people have. It's about a 50-50 universe where people have powers. So, the story starts with the main character, Sarai. So, that's her name right there. Obviously, it's biblical. That's for a reason. And instead of going into her backstory right now, I'd rather just describe the first scene that goes on. Sarai is a high school student, so we can imagine her going into some kind of, high school, pretty big, university style, I would guess, in an undefined country as of this point. It could be probably in what we would consider the United Nations. And yes, this story has a couple of differences from the history we have right now. So, as you can see, that is my crappily drawn high school. So, as you can see, the story will begin with Sarai in high school. The class will begin, and there probably would be a better way to erase all that. And so what you have right here is exposition going on. So again, I'm not going to put in a lot of effort into the quality of this content. This is mainly to tell a story, and holy cow, this is bad. I'm trying to draw her hair from behind, and as you can see, it is not really working. So you have the students all sitting at desks, and I'm trying my best to draw that desk. And of course, I am failing. So you have Sarai right there. Obviously, Sarai is going to be ethnic. I was choosing something along the lines of Egyptian, Mediterranean to kind of get a different style rather than using the generic token backgrounds. So you have Sarai in a classroom with, of course, other people, nameless nobodies. Doesn't really matter who they are at this point because they're just extras. But you got the teacher giving a history lesson. And what's really interesting is this history lesson is, of course, different from what you would consider history being told. And of course, what's really interesting is the map. Holy cow, that does not look like the United States at all. So we're going to try to draw the United States and Canada, kind of right there. Holy cow, that is bad. But just imagine that that's the United States and that's Europe, right? But as you go further and then you see the rest of Europe and Africa and so on, you have Australia over there, but you will see that Japan is missing. It is absolutely non-existent. That doesn't mean it didn't exist before, but it's gone now. And so, as you can see, this story is going to talk a lot about superpowers and how they change the way the world is. So, Japan is no more. And at this point, nobody's asking questions because everybody already knew that, right? Because, again, this is how the story is established. We're not going to have a clueless kid asking all these questions. We're actually, the audience, we're being fed the information through things like dialogue, background information, and so on, especially news. So you have that going on. This scene is just supposed to establish history at this point, but you also get to know a little bit about Sarai. One thing about Sarai is that she's an orphan. So, the teacher will ask, her some question, and at this point, I would imagine that she kind of has this somber, very, oh geez, that is not a womanly face. I'm not the best at drawing people, obviously. So she kind of has that attitude of, I don't really want to talk to you right now. So she has this uninterested, bored look on her face as, this history lesson's going on. This history lesson is more for the audience rather than the story itself. So she's bored, right? But the most important thing about this scene is that one of the students right next to her, remember how I told you that they were all useless? Well, guess what? That guy right here, that guy is not useless. So, pretty much, at this point in the story, we're supposed to understand a little bit about gifts and how they are. Sarai's gift, right over here, her gift is just temperature control. Basically, she can modify temperatures by, choosing how they move, but she can't create heat or destroy it, because you can't, bend the laws of physics. So right now, she would be having, maybe some kind of drink, possibly a water bottle or whatever, and she freezes it. But obviously, if she freezes it, that means the heat that was in there goes somewhere else. So, it could dissipate through steam or whatever. I haven't thought out the scene very well, but pretty much this dude over here notices she does this, and this guy's like, wow, that's actually a pretty cool gift. And in this story, powers are called gifts. So what he does is he pretty much tells her, at this point, that he and a bunch of other dudes also use their gifts. And this is important because as the teacher is talking, you also see that there's a stigma about using gifts. So even though everyone, not everyone, about half the population has gifts, you see that it's not supposed to be used. It's again, it's supposed to be a stigma. It's supposed to be taboo to use your gifts. And of course, as the audience will infer, this is because of what happened to Japan. And so he tells Sarai, so he's, talking to her or whatever. I don't know what I was doing over here. So he's just telling Sarai about how he and his friends also use their gifts, but of course they have to do it in secret, right? And so he's just talking to her, letting her know, he's like, yo, meet me outside after class, whatever, and she agrees. So, this is after school, of course. They'll probably meet, let's say, behind a football field. So you have the fence over here, with the linked chains. Oh, geez, this is bad. But it doesn't matter. Again, this is storyboard. So they meet up over here, and, they meet under the bleachers. So it's kind of like, those typical old cheesy 90s style, deviant teen kind of thing. They're meeting under the bleachers to have a chat or whatever. And so they chat. He pretty much tells her that him and his friends, they use their powers. And so this guy over here, I really never gave him a name because, again, he's sort of important. So let's call him Richard right now. So Richard, he'll just have some generic, simple gift. And most people do. We won't be exploring too much about gifts that are absolutely ridiculous. So you got Richard, he has the gift that he can create a little spark in his hand. So it's cool because he could start fires, right? But the thing is you start realizing that Sarai, she and her gift have multiple applications. So again, Sarai's kind of going to have that emo haircut style going on, dark hair because she's Mediterranean, right? But, she's also pretty closed off, quiet or whatever. But her power pretty much means that she can get energy from anywhere. But again, she has to release it. So imagine, he lights a spark, creates a fire, right? So he's making a fire, and then she can just suck it all up, completely take that fire away. But that heat is now inside, whatever you would consider the source of where she could store it. So imagine she carries this water bottle on her, right? Well, if she's carrying this water bottle on her and absorbs all the heat from the fire, she can put that heat into the water, causing it to boil and steam. So now you can see how her ability is all about control. So again, this is just the first scene of the whole story, setting up the history. So we're setting up the history right now, the background. and the characters. Again, all of this is supposed to create the excitement for, oh geez, I went off the rails, is to create the excitement for the audience, right? Because the audience wants to know, well, what happened to Japan? Like, that's kind of important, right? But that won't be explained in the first chapter. It'll be explained later. So with all of this, you have two characters that are going to be important. You got Richard, who just kind of seems like a punk, and then you got Sarai. Sarai at first seems very typical. She's just closed off, kind of emo. So typical shy emo girl kind of thing. She gets dropped off by her grandma, so obviously she doesn't have a typical parental system. So I would say something along the lines of family issues. So you got, grandma dropping her off, family issues, but she doesn't reveal a lot of her past at this point. We don't want to have just an info dump. And Richard, we really only know from his attitude. So he's kind of cocky. He's pretty much free-spirited. He sees using gifts as just kind of like rebellion, just typical teen rebellion, right? So we're in a society where you have people with gifts, but they're not supposed to use it. And the audience is supposed to say, why? Why do we not use gifts, right? Oh boy. So that's where chapter 2 will come in. Why don't we use gifts? It has to have something to do with the reason why Japan's not here anymore. And it's supposed to be the reason why this story is actually supposed to be set in the year about 2020 or so, near future, right? But the thing is that the technology the technology is going to be 1990s style. So that means you're going to barely have what's the internet. You're going to not even have things like YouTube. You're going to have flip phones, with the numpads and all that. Like, there's no such thing as a smartphone in this universe, right? And it's because technology must have been set back because of what Powers did. Technology has been set back by Powers or gifts. Because in this world where gifts are discovered, technology must have definitely been more of a second importance. How in our world, technology has always been the forefront of what we want to discover. But imagine if everyone, 50% of people born would have a gift, and those gifts, of course, range in powers and stuff. This story is supposed to say what would happen if gifts were really in the world. So this is this is the introduction video. This is my first attempt, first take and everything. Let me know how I'm doing, and just leave a reply. As of right now, I haven't set up social media for this, but have a good one, and yeah, have a good one. So that's it.